What to say about Brian Eno? Or perhaps I should call him by his full name, Brian Peter George St. John le Baptiste de la Salle Eno, often credited simply as Eno. Wonder why? Brian Eno doesn't consider himself a musician. He refers to himself as a synthesist. He works heavily with synthesizers and he specializes particularly in using the studio itself as an instrument. I'd say he's one of the rarest breeds out there. Here you have a really eclectic musician, a guy who makes some really bizarre stuff, a pioneer in the field of ambient music and generative music with albums like Music for Airports or Another Green World. And at the same time, this guy's made some of the most commercial albums on the planet. He's worked with U2 and Coldplay, Depeche Mode and Devo. He's really paved the ground, or paved the way, for musicians to express themselves in really bizarre fashions and remain commercial. Some of the things he's done includes David Bowie, U2, The Talking Heads, Devo, Paul Simon, Michael Nyman, Coldplay, Robert Fripp, Slowdive, John Cage, Philip Glass, John Cale, Nico, Depeche Mode, Pavarotti, and probably several other huge bands that somebody's really angry that I didn't just name. That's the short list. Recently he's produced Coldplay's two newest albums, Viva La Vida and Milo Xyloto, which I think is probably their best work since their debut. And this is the same sensation. You can hear almost sound design in Milo Xyloto, and you know that's Brian Eno using the studio as an instrument. Brian Eno was really responsible for helping things like ambient music and minimalism take off. He worked heavily with David Bowie in Germany with the albums Low and Heroes, which really helped Bowie's career, and Brian Eno's. His reputation as a musician is what brings musicians to him to ask for him to produce them. And he's just done so much weird and eclectic stuff. He made the Windows 95 startup sound. Ironically, he made it on a Mac. That's not ironic. To give you an idea of some of the weirder stuff he's done, he once started his own record label called Obscure Records, and they made precisely that. He worked with people like John Cale of the Velvet Underground, you know, Michael Nyman, who makes really avant-garde soundtracks, Philip Glass, one of the bastions of experimental musicality. He worked with people like that, and I feel at his heart, you know, that's probably the type of musician Brian Eno most closely identifies with. Brian Eno is also known for a production technique that he referred to as oblique strategies, which is a deck of cards that he created with really cryptic Zen suggestions on them, like try something old, or, you know, be uncomfortable, things like that. And he would give them to artists, say, pick a card, and we have to do it. And it just forces artists out of their comfort zone to create something new. My first synthesizer ever, it was an old Ensoniq, and it still read cards. But I went online to forums and I asked around, like, what are some things to strive for? You know, what's good synthesis to listen to? And somebody pointed me towards Skysaw on Brian Eno's solo work, Another Green World. And that track still influences what I think synthesizers should sound like today. It's just so monumental. And after that, I immediately went through his previous work, like Here Come the Warm Jets and Evening Star with Robert Fripp of King Crimson, who I love. And I just fell in love with some of his music. When I was researching things for this podcast, I was actually shocked to find out that he's done things like The Joshua Tree for U2, which I never would have guessed based on the music that I knew Brian Eno for. But then you go back and you listen to a track like With or Without You, and you hear the synthesizer work on that track, and it's unmistakably him. And it made a whole lot of sense. One particular technique that I love that Brian Eno invented was what's referred to as Frippertronics, which is a collaboration between him and Robert Fripp. But it was groundbreaking for the time. It's essentially an infinite feedback tape loop array, where you pass signal from one tape machine into another, and you can turn single guitar notes into symphonies. Brian Eno is somebody that gives hope to me as a musician, that if you are just passionate about what you do, you don't have to really make concessions to anybody. You can make the music the way you want. You can help other artists in your own style, in your own fashion. You can help them make their art and still let your personality shine through and be immensely successful. And I think if there's any legacy that Brian Eno has given us, it's that.